Hi everyone, welcome to our little session on managing people and process and building and driving change. My name is Willie. I think some of you might have heard my dulcet tones on the CMO series podcast. Unfortunately, it's the same in real life. First of all, I'm just going to set the scene. Understanding what makes attorneys, lawyers tick is one thing and a challenge in itself. But actually knowing how to manage that change in behaviour is another thing. Today, we're going to be talking about that. Not me, luckily, because I don't have the same knowledge as these two lovely ladies. There's loads of models out there. We're going to touch upon that. I think I had a quick look and tried to educate myself, but got unstuck very quickly. There's like hundreds of them. But again, we're going to delve into a few of the models. And you guys all work in law firms. You know how unique they are. I think probably some of the advice is going to be a mix and match thing. You know, take what you can from these different change behavioural models and piece that together in your organisations. It's also quite hard. We had this discussion before. If your law firms, and the partners are doing really well, most of the stuff you read about change, inertia kills you, all this sort of stuff in other organisations. But actually, if you've got your partners going, well, our profit's gone up, we're doing better than last year. Why do we need to change anything? And that's the real difficult thing that you guys all have the challenge with building projects. Enough of me talking. Anyway, I'm going to introduce these lovely ladies sitting next to me. So we have Julie Chodos, who is currently the Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer over at Axinn. Reasonably new to the role. You're coming up to a year there, but Julie has a whole wealth of experience in professional services, including a long stint at Freshfields and over 12 years at BDO on the way, so always in the professional services arena. Julie's going to talk a bit more about that and specifically how change has helped her build her role. Christa Crane, who's sitting to my left, is now Chief Client Officer at Loeb Loeb and has been for at Loeb Loeb for nearly 10 years. So there's a big celebration coming up. But again, Christa's been in the industry a while. You've got Freshfields in common, I think, and via Aaron Fox as well, and Bingham on the way. So without further ado, I think what we are going to talk about, I should have put that one up before, sorry. What we're going to talk about is a few of the key takeaways are going to be, really understanding the need and what the clients want in terms of change, and that helps drive what you're going to do. The transformative power as well of inviting input, and I think Christa probably knows this from a website, Rebuild, not inviting too much input is probably a good thing sometimes.
Yeah, that's right.
With partners. Then also understanding what your partners want from the firm and how to bring them on that journey, which again is no easy feat. We're going to set the scene, and hopefully this plays, with a little video called The Elephant and the Rider that Julie has chosen, and she's going to talk you through it. But it's quite a nice way to just set the scene in this. We good to play? Sorry.
Psychologists know that there are two systems in our brains, the rational system and the emotional system. Jonathan Haidt, who's a psychologist at NYU, came up with a great analogy for these two systems. He said, think of your brain as a human rider atop an elephant. The rider represents the rational system. That's the part of us that plans and problem solves. The rider might do some analyzing and decide, hey, I want to go that way. But it's the elephant, representing the emotional system, that provides the power for the journey. The rider can try to lead the elephant or drag the elephant, but if these two ever disagree, who would you bet on? The elephant has a 6-ton weight advantage, and it's exactly that power imbalance that makes adopting new behaviors very hard. If you want this duo to head a new direction, you also need to think about the path, which represents the external environment. This duo is more likely to complete a journey if you can shorten the distance and remove any obstacles in their way. So bottom line, if you want to lead change, you've got to do 3 things. Give direction to the rider, knowledge of how to get to the destination. You've got to motivate the elephant, which means tapping into emotion. And finally, you need to shape the path to allow for easy progress. That's how change happens.
There we go. I'll give you a virtual high five because it actually played.
Woo!
Julie's had experience before where she's tried to play that and it didn't work. So there we go. Are we saying that lawyers are like elephants? Is that what you're saying?
No, no.
Good. Okay.
And I was prepared to do improv just in case it didn't play. When I was a sales leader at a company called RGP, my partner in crime, who led the people side of the house, I led operations and sales. She is now the change leader at that firm, and she shared this video with me, and I thought it was so emblematic of what we go through every day in terms of tapping into hearts and minds for people. She and I were two women that were installed to lead that region after two men had run it for 20 years. And neither of us were prepared for the amount of change that just being women meant in organization. So I really like how that video frames the conversation, because so much of what we do in rolling out and trying to bring change to our organizations, even and I've been through it many times, often forget how emotional people are and how to appeal to that side of them.
I think that leads nicely on to sort of one of the change management theories that we're going to talk through, which the Kubler-Ross one is one that you've used before, Julie,
yes.
in your roles.
Yes, and I know Christa has a lot of experience with this as well. But in that role, we sold change management, and I had the opportunity to meet with different clients about change management. And the consultant that was working alongside me presented this slide, and when I saw it, I thought, this is so interesting. This was developed in the late 1960s, and it follows the 5 stages of grief. And when you think about our audience of lawyers who are super highly skeptical, highly autonomous, huge sense of urgency, low resilience, low sociability, when you think about the change curve that they go through when we're trying to roll out a new brand or a CRM or any other type of technology, to remember that the time continuum is really important, and think about what they go through on that journey and how you might impact that along the way, is something that I'm consistently reminding myself of when I'm trying to roll out new things.
Christa, what's your experience been with change management and using this?
My experience has been, I think we talked about this too, so many great models out there. I don't know that there's one for me that I would say really, really works, but I think there are elements of almost all of them. Like, this totally resonates with me in terms of, just taking a piece and saying like, okay, I get this, or I really need to solve for this. So I would say, I think over the years I've picked and chosen a bit, but I think they are really valuable as a framework, if nothing else, very, very valuable.
And why have you guys picked this out instead of, we've talked about all these other ones, McKinsey do one, there's ones that are one-to-one, nudge theories, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, is that one that you picked out for a particular reason? Or?
Well, I like the visual for that, and there's a lot of change models, and my provocative premise is that none of them fit a law firm environment, and I think Christa is going to talk about how you manage this in a partnership in particular. And I've been in partnerships, and I was at BDO for a long time, and I was at a public company. And the structure for leading and the structure for cascading knowledge across teams and all of those kinds of things and creating scale is very different and valued. I don't believe that that's necessarily valued in the law firm environment, which is okay, because we can still borrow the best of what many of these models have to offer in terms of best practices and pull them in and fit them into things that I think fit the law firm model.
And do you guys actually show the partners this?
No.
No. But I think some of the, even just whether it's, today we're going to be going into case studies, just kind of hearing how certain elements get applied, that for me is powerful. So sometimes there's a story within when you're solving for grief or one of the to be able to kind of make it meaningful. So I think you use it, but you don't use it.
Yeah. Use the theory behind it.
Yeah.
You touched on it there. We're gonna bring it to life with some anecdotal case studies. So I mean, maybe it's helpful if each of you can maybe share a case study that you guys have worked on over your time. We'll start with you, Christa.
Sure. Yeah, so we tried to choose ones that would be probably everyone has touched or is touching in some way, and tried to choose different ones. So for me, I will put it under, our firm went through a rebrand, but I will say that really we used that in a lot of ways as a cover. We were doing quite a bit more than redoing the website, rebranding the firm. I think the firm was going through a bit of an identity crisis. Who are we? Who do we want to be? What do we subscribe to? And Vicki Sicilian, one of my colleagues, our chief development officer, we were talking about, you can't go outside with something that people don't really believe inside. So we were going through, I think, when I think back, I'm like, oh my gosh, we went to as under this, an industry model. We really consolidated who we are. We had sort of, no longer was your practice designation inside what we used outside, because that's not what resonates. That's not what clients need. So we had just an enormous amount of change bundled under that one umbrella. And so we did, really, I would say 18 months or so of just kind of constant change for us, for the team, and as well the partners.
Which is tough to, everyone wants to make asks. If you do it all at the same time, it's a tough thing, right? Which leads me nicely onto maybe your case study, Julie, where an element of if you want to drive this change, you have to have trust. And again, there's probably some new CMOs in the room as well, which you became at Axinn, and you sort of had to get buy-in right straight away. So your real life case study is a bit different, isn't it?
Sure. And if you don't mind flipping to the next slide, because this might. So I think all of those models boil down to a couple of key principles that Christa and I talked about and sort of made in plain speak, if you will, because I also realized that Axinn and my COO, Annie Westover, is here too. They tease me sometimes. They're like, you sound like a consultant. And so I use that to make fun of myself, because I think anything you're trying to do, if you're not mirroring the right language, maybe doesn't land as well. So at Axinn in particular, looking for the opportunity for impact specific to that culture, and then bringing folks along that journey, which includes everything from how do you get the tone right at the top, how do you cascade that through all the levels, and how do you communicate that in a way that lands at the ear of the organization. And I think all of that helps build trust along the way and helps win hearts and minds. That elephant was hard to convince. Specifically at Axinn, I walked into a cocktail party and crashed it with James, and I said, I'm going to hire you. And I think he thought I was some crazy person off the street that was looking for free drinks. But I had been at Freshfields, and I saw the power of how the platform worked. And there was a really strong appetite at Axinn to produce content, but a real tension within the lawyers that they felt like it had to be perfect, it had to be deeply substantive, and what they were doing wasn't enough to improve the brand, and they were kind of putting us off with, well, I only write substantive pieces. I'm sure everybody in the room here has heard that same excuse. And the Passle platform gave them tactile autonomy. So they could produce something themselves, self-governing, because there was a governance process built into it, and they could touch and feel and see the impact of their own work in a way that I could certainly never convince them of. So when we put the power of that in their hands, they thought it went really, really well. And that bought me enough time, because one of our key partners wanted me to build a website in 3 months. I said, I can't give you that, but I can give you this. And that bought me a lot more time to do a proper brand refresh and new website, which, shout out to Living Group and Ruby Law, which will be coming out in the fall. But I needed to give them something that they could use in the meantime. And this turned out to be our opportunity for impact.
I suppose that, your one, Christa, when you're doing the actual website, you know, what Julie's just described is they're actively using something. How do you bring the partners in and then make them not pick every single Pantone color and, you know, really involve them when they're not that involved, you know, because you've got to own that project. So what would your advice be around that?
Yeah, I think be very, very specific about what you ask for input on. There actually are places where it's amazing to have their input, because you are then able to feel like, you know, when you're talking to other partners who maybe you're never going to find something that works for everybody. But to be able to say, you know, we had some of our, you know, most or, you know, pickiest leaders, you know, participate in these focus groups, things like that, it actually helps. And again, we were also dealing with just the identity. We wanted people to feel like they were a part of the build. And so that idea of, you know, allowing for input for us was really important. So we were really, though, intentional, to your point. No one picks colors. But what we would do is we would come up with a few options that we would say, like, actually, both of these work. We could get behind either one of these, and maybe you show that. Or maybe it's, you know, you have two versions of one thing, and it's, you know, we could take a little bit of each. What do we like? But we wouldn't ask the question quite that open-ended. We try to be like very specific, A or B, but knowing that either A or B we could live with. So I think that idea where it's just really, really focused. By the way, you know, there still are things where I'm like, well, it backfires sometimes, right? So what, you know, you learn, you know, we're getting ready actually to do another one. This time Vicky is running it rather than me. But she was a part of the last one. And it's like you pick, you know, the things that every time something doesn't work, you think about it differently, you go a little more narrow. But I think that idea of really trying to focus it is important.
And how do you, this is probably aimed at you again, Julie, in terms of how do you have to understand partners, right? So you have to get close to them, what makes them tick. I think Trish was talking about it in the other room earlier, you know, how you can manage them. And everyone's read that book. Most people are talking about the Atomic Habits, where, you know, they talk about if you're going to change a behavior, you have to make it attractive, right? Or if they've got bad habits, make it unattractive, get rid of them. But to get close to them and change their behavior, how have you found that? How have you done it?
In a lot of different ways.
Right.
And I think it's really, I think Nicole mentioned effective listening. I really like using questions. I learned this in BD sales training. You know, the person who asks the questions is controlling the conversation. And a lot of times I will use this for different partners just to really understand what is the motivating factor for them. So as we were preparing for this, I thought about a particular younger partner, and Axinn has a lot of young, hungry partners, which is fantastic. And they're all looking for how are they going to be the person that gets the phone call from the client and bring that business in. And during a color selection exercise, as an example, which was kind of torturous, I have to say, this one partner who's, you know, super sharp and quite hard charging really wanted to have his voice heard. So while he's not in a leadership position necessarily in the firm, I pulled him into the process. And then when we got to a point where there was another partner had a visceral reaction to a fantastic color that we got in the palette, this younger partner reached out to me and he's like, it's beautiful. I love it. We're going to make this happen. I'm going to go hunt him down out of a deposition. I'm going to pull him into this room and we're going to nail it. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Because I could never have achieved that without his allyship there. And had I not recognized that he just wanted to be part of the vision of the future, I might have had a miss there. So to your question, Will, I think it's different things motivate different people. And I think it's listening for that, looking for that, and then trying to take that motivation and apply it to whatever project you're working on to capture that buy-in.
And it is a unique, everyone knows the partnership model because they work in it or try and sell to it. It is a unique environment. I mean, Christa, have you had it where it's quite a flat environment and leadership model? So, I mean, have you had things that have worked better than others? Have you had things that haven't worked when you've tried to manage lawyers?
Yeah, I think for me, because, when you have a partnership model, depending on who you ask, most of them are going to say they're all partners, they're all, the boss of, and that, of course, isn't actually the case. I mean, there are, you can't go to everybody with everything, and I think they do know that, but you can go to every group. And, what we would do is, for example, work with, a group leader to select a person who we agreed would be a great spokesperson for that department and who we knew was going to be kind of in it for the right, with the right spirit. So I think being really careful about how you get to what looks to be a very representative piece of the population without getting to everybody is important. And I think the other thing too, we spend a lot of time thinking about, are we asking for input or are we, previewing, where something's like mostly baked, but you're going to see it before everybody else? Huge difference. And sometimes people don't, love where they get, which of those they get included in. But, it's if you're trying to, really roll something out and quickly across an organization, if you tried to be too inclusive, you're just never going to get it done. So I think finding that balance and also being really creative with how you treat those previews and, making them feel like it's special and they're part of the leadership rollout, things like that. I think things like that can really make a difference and go a long way. But, if you don't segment in some meaningful way, and I know we're going to talk process in a little bit, but you also have to have some process to it. So when people say, why not me or why him? And, I've got a bigger practice than he does. You have to be able to really, have a good reason and rationale for that so that it doesn't feel like you just picked and chose the people that we're going to support. Sometimes, by the way, it may just be, in conjunction with your department chair, this is who we selected. So you can work around that to some degree, but you have to be able to make it feel like it's intentional and fair, thoughtful.
So you're managing the people, but then as you touched upon the process side of things, again, how do you go about that? Have you found things that work, Julie, in your experience with process and asking lawyers to change their process?
I try not to use the word process or plan because, and I haven't been in legal marketing that long myself, less than 5 years, but I remember walking into a big litigation BD meeting and I said, and this is so exciting, what is your BD plan? And all the partners were like,
right.
And I was like, oh, whoops. But I think the process, they have to see it and they have to know marketing is running it. And we have to be very, not authoritative, but own that process. So we talk about it in ways that resonate with them. The Passle governance piece, while we didn't talk a lot about process, we talked a lot about who had the ability to oversee content and what would that look like. So practice chairs felt really good about it. Oh, okay. I get to edit it. I get to send it back to somebody. I get to make comments. I do it all on this platform. It's really easy for me as a practice chair because I'm too busy to get all these emails and all these articles and all this other stuff. Oh, and marketing is going to handle the proofing and the posting and picking the right image and all that kind of stuff. So having them not even feel like they're part of a process, but something that feels programmatic and maybe not overemphasizing scale and all of those good words we grew up with in consulting. I know there's a lot of people out of consulting here. I grew up thinking that that's an amazing thing, scale and efficiency. But those words don't really land with lawyers, I don't think, because that's not how they think about running their business. They think about bespoke, specific advice that they give. And how the sausage is made, I don't know that they care that much about that.
So you have to think a bit like them sometimes just to understand. Yeah.
Yes.
Christa, you've done it with focus groups and things like that. Can you elaborate a bit on how you put those together and made those work?
Sure. Yeah. So we did a couple of things in terms of focus groups. For us, it was a great way to get clients involved, referral sources, like who are the people using our website on the outside? And the really great thing about that is it made it very hard when a partner would say, I can't use this or this doesn't work. And we would say, honestly, it doesn't matter because we have gone through enough. We have enough data. We've gone through enough of these sessions with the people that we need to be able to find you and use the website. where they're telling us this is what works and this is how they're finding things. This is what the search results are showing. So we did just an awful lot of outside focus groups, and that really did help us cut through. When people had two different opinions, you could just keep going back to that data. I think also internally, again, the kind of building some sense of, we're all in this together. We're trying to come up with, something that resonates, language and the voice we're using, certainly also the look and feel. But I think we did a lot of internal focus groups too, to allow people to react to some of the iterations at the right points in time. So I think those two things were very, very helpful in terms of just making sure there was, again, some process and some rigor to it.
You also touched upon there the client impact, which again, from a key takeaway, we're going to talk about the clients next. They can help you drive change as well, right? So, I mean, how did you do that, Julie, in terms of your sort of case study with thought leadership and using the client to leverage them?
We didn't have the benefit of client feedback for that piece of it necessarily, but it was me going around and talking to all the lawyers about what they wanted most from me when I joined the firm, and that was improve the brand. And so it gave me the platform to say, well, the best way to do this is through content and thought leadership. And then I pulled in a whole bunch of good Thomson Reuters data to point out the fact that clients will consider you if they've never used you before, if they can read that you have a point of view. And if we can disseminate that point of view on a more consistent, regular basis, that will put you in a position to potentially be seen as somebody who has something smart to say about this topic. And clients really value that. So having them have a voice and put that out there, and now starting to use the metrics behind who's reading and who's looking at it and being able to show that to the lawyers is giving them a lot of aha moments so that we can continue the journey of putting thought leadership out there.
With your specific project, Christa, on the website, and I'm sure, again, people are either going through it or have been through it, there's often a battle where the partners want, okay, this is what I want it to look like. It's not for them really, is it? It's actually for the client. So how do you feed that back, and how do you let the client know we built this thing for you?
Yeah, I think the client feedback piece there again was it was huge, just to be able to really be able to go broad enough that we had couldn't have been just one, or even half of our groups. We had to say we have talked to clients from every single one of our regions of practices, et cetera. We had a usability expert as well. So it wasn't like we're just running these focus groups. We were really, really careful so that there was some science behind what they were being asked. And one of the things that we heard from them, not surprising, but people want to know who they're working with. And our prior site was like very, very, it was Mr. Ms. I mean, it was just, you felt separated from the people that were on the other side. Suits and ties, very kind of formal photos, just very simple imagery. It was a hodgepodge at the time of who gets top line on the website. I think we had 50 at one point of regions, practices, industries, all mixed together. You just kind of leave it to the person coming in to find it. And what we heard from our clients is we want to know who we're working with. So that idea of being a lot more personal. So injecting quotes, much more casual language, casual, photos, everything, really much more engaging. And I think, again, being able to get to what they want. We kept hearing over and over again that industry vertical is what they wanted, and that a lot of the language our folks use internally just didn't resonate. I mean, one of the things I think was great for us, we found a few people early on. One was our chairman at the time, whose practice, they were they're very proud of it. It's a big group. It actually makes a lot of sense the way we've named it. Internally, we know exactly what's under it. We know who's a part of it. Outside, though, it does not resonate. And so we actually told him that will not have a presence on the website. What it will look like is this under the industry verticals, these under practice. And it took a little bit of doing, but he actually bought into that. And then it made it a lot easier as you're dealing with others in the firm to be able to say, there is no way we're going to do that because our chairman has already gone ahead, and for the external, he's disbanded, and we're following the voice of the client in that regard. So it did help us immensely.
So you use that, and then you pick I suppose you're saying advocates, champions around the business to get that project through. There's a panel I'm sure everyone's going to be in later on that's really interesting around the COO. Did you guys use COOs to help drive change as well? Was that you got cozied up very quickly to COO?
Yes. My COO is sitting here.
Yeah.
And it's been a really fantastic partnership because Annie was here at the firm for several years prior to me joining. And I'm a person who operates much better when I can bounce ideas off of other people. And it was a good yin-yang because I was like, do we think this is really going to work? And Annie knew where all the bodies were buried. So it was really nice to collaborate on that and figure out how to get it through and show it to the partners and who might it resonate with this way or that way. But certainly partnership within your organization, because as marketing, you see a slice of things, but your head of operations, in my past, I worked across the organization all the time because you get huge benefit of bringing everybody else in along the way. Because marketing is usually at the leading edge of doing something more fun.
What didn't go well? From these case studies, and you've given some great advice to everyone. What would you say if you did it again, you would change, or dig the bones out of the bad things? What would you say, Christa?
Vicki, we've been talking so much about this because here we go again, but I think we just keep kind of going back and thinking about the what worked and what didn't. I think that idea, the really specifically where you're asking for input, I cannot stress that enough. There were moments where sometimes we would walk out of a meeting, I'm like, great, we nailed it. And then there were other times where I was like, wow, I didn't know, that was going to happen. And then you have to kind of pick up the pieces after. So I think taking what we learned and really being even more programmatic about that is important. The other thing, I feel like we did this a lot, but I would do it, I double down. I would do it twice as much. The work that goes in before a meeting, we used to say, before you convene a group of any sort, if you're expecting to walk out with an outcome that you need to be able to live with, you can't go in cold. You have to kind of know where those people are. You have to have the right discussions in advance. You have to draw them in the right ways. And so I think that those pre-conversations, I cannot stress enough, like crazy important. And maybe in some cases we need them even more than we'd had them. I think we probably did. And the final thing, my prior chair at my last firm, he used to have this great saying. He would say, there is a huge difference between saying, I hear you, or I hear you, but. And you have to get a lot better at the I hear you, but. So I think being in a spot, whether it's those one-on-one pre-meetings or you're in a broader meeting and someone's always going to want to say something that's a little avant-garde, or they're going to disagree, or they just feel like being contrary, or maybe they have a really good point, but you can't do both. We kept saying we have one website, just one. So somehow we have to get to a place where we can, cut through here. So I think that idea of being able to hear, everyone's not going to say this is perfect, it's fabulous. I wouldn't change a thing. So you can listen to the issues, but you have to be able to move past that.
And it's a fine line in terms of failing as well. I remember speaking with you, Julie, at the start, and you were sort of saying, I'm going to try stuff. Some of it might not work, whilst trying to build gravitas in the firm. But so you need a success, you need a trophy project, you need something to get that gravitas and not fail. But you weren't too worried if you did, because you were asking for a lot of things, right?
A lot of things, and I'm high on the risk profile. I don't know why, but I do. I like pushing things through and almost to the brink. Very exciting for me. But what's not gone well? So we had an incredibly successful launch with Passle, but now we're in that not valley of despair exactly. But I thought I'd convinced all these people. And then lo and behold, some of our senior partners, and this always happens, go back to, I don't think I got a job off of it in the last 6 months. And you're like, that's not how it works. So I was going to crowdsource the answer, and I have some ideas, but it's a good reminder to me that you can get people really excited and really on board and have a great moment in time. And we all naturally fall back to our lawyers are naturally skeptical. And if they don't have an immediate result, how do we keep them engaged so it's scalable and sustainable along the way? But anyway, this is like an incredible room of group therapy, so I would ask the audience. Any ideas?
You just never stop talking about it. Freddie knows this. I talk about it every meeting that I have, every time the partners are there, what we're doing. And I also really push the importance of sharing content, not just creating the content, because not everyone's a writer. And candidly, we don't want some of these attorneys writing because it's a little frightening. But so push that you can be the king of share if writing's not your thing. There are roles everyone can have, and you just keep pushing and pushing and talking and talking. And about the time you feel like you've talked about it enough, is probably when you've talked about it enough. But I never stop talking about it.
That's great.
Do we have any other questions, or is anyone about to embark on a sort of project that you want to ask our two panelists about, how they'd go about it? No.
Psychologically safe space, I think you're talking about earlier.
Yeah.
We're available after too. If anybody has more specific questions off stage, we can take those as well.
Would you guys, I'll start with you, Christa, in terms of just leaving everyone with one piece of advice. I mean, if you could nail it down to one nugget, what would you say to everyone about change management and making it successful?
I think so. You had touched on this earlier, Will and Julie, that you try things, you're never going to get it right every time. But I think doing the best you can, be willing to take some risks, because if it's too easy, then you're probably not pushing it enough. So be willing to step out there, accept when it goes well and when it doesn't. And when it doesn't, try the best you can to learn from that and kind of take it and just do the best you can to move on. I think, I know you said one, but I think that's one. And then two, I think really surrounding yourself with people that you trust, because you can't do it alone, no matter what it is or who you are, how, never. And even for people that have smaller teams, you can't. You need external experts. I'm looking at Meg Pritchard, who has been an amazing partner for us on the content side. We literally could not have done that. We couldn't do most of our projects without her. And you think about like building the team, whether it's the brand experts, people within the organization, stakeholders, but really being super intentional about who do we need to be able to do this successfully. You own it at the end of the day. It's yours, and it's going to be, but you can't do it alone. So the right people, I think, is a big piece as well.
Julie, what would you say for your...
Yeah, I think that's so true, that there's so many people when you're rolling out a new project, you don't know necessarily when you start who's going to emerge as a really strong, capable person, whether they're leading or they're supporting or other things. And I'm constantly reminded of that there's skill sets that emerge along the way, and you can tap people and pull them on board. But I would say, kind of like when I was going to have my first child and I stupidly did natural childbirth because my mother lied to me. And the doctor was like, you really need to be flexible with your plan. And I think, it's exciting to think about the art of the possible when you're rolling out a project, but then things happen and stuff always goes wrong or differently than you think. And I think it's being flexible along the way with your own plan and being able to pivot so that you make sure you're really achieving the primary goals. I overthink things at times, and I know that about myself, so I will pull back and run it by other people and try to see, am I just creating more work for no reason here? Should we do something differently?
So I guess a big takeaway is probably, if you want to drive change, you need sponsors, you need a team around you, but you need to keep banging the drums, Karen says, and it evolves, right, as well. So the whole change management takes time sometimes, but it evolves along the way, so it's got to chip away. Are there any questions for our two guests on anything? No, there we go. I think you've done a good job then. No.
Thank you.